Very long today, so I thought I would paint a very mini. What these are for, let me show you. These are, sorry for the rustling, these are for my little minis. These are little mini ornaments. And got a few more. There are a few other ones. There's another one. I try not to put my grubby fingers on them. And so I like to keep them just kind of simple. Here's one more. This one's pretty simple too. And there we go. So that's what I am working on today. I have a little pile here of other ones. If you want to see them, I'll show you at the end. I can show a few of those. I also have a few others. This other square one. This one's kind of cool. Let me show you this one real quick. Yeah, this one was kind of a fun one. An empty frame for later if you want to check that out. And here is a square one. So this one's a little bit larger. So these are what I sold last year as my winter offerings. I didn't actually list them or anything this year. I had them all made, and then I guess, truth be told, I kind of just chickened out. Last year was kind of a lot. Selling is not my thing. I love what I do. I love painting. I love practicing. I love demonstrating and sharing and all those type things, but I don't love the selling aspect. I like to paint for me. Oddly, I don't like to paint for anybody else. You know, that's kind of sounds selfish, but for me, that's the way it it just comes out that way for me, like the actual painting itself. If I went in thinking I was painting for somebody else, I would overthink, I would overdo, I would not let go. I would have all that stuff stuck in my head, and it just wouldn't feel very, I don't want to say authentic. I wouldn't feel very, I don't know, it just wouldn't feel very good, I guess. That's a weird way to say that. Let me set all that aside so I have some room over here. Get everything else out of the way. All right, so I paint with handmade paints, if you didn't know. I love handmade paints. I'm going to this is my water dropper I got from my advent calendar this year. So I'm just gonna put some drops of water on my paper here. And so then I take my flat brush, which I also put in clean water, and then just wet my paper. And if you get too much water, you just wanna kind of drain it off. Sometimes I add too much water. The dropper is a little bit new for me, so I'm not exactly, I don't exactly have the right amount of water going on to that in the first place. I'm gonna grab a round brush, another round brush. Excuse me. I'm gonna grab, just a few brushes to have and see which one I wanna use. Okay, so let's go ahead and let that water sit for a second is what I'm doing. And then you can take another brush and just make sure that water's evenly spread out. You just really want your water to be even. You want to see a sheen, but you don't want to see puddles of water, right? So you want a nice even sheen versus just tons of water. And this paper is so small. It's tiny, teeny, tiny, tiny. So it doesn't really matter as much as it might in a different situation. So let's play with some blues. I have some handmade paints here, and let's take this. I think this is called, what is this one? I don't know where anything is in this palette. Let's not use that palette. Let's use a palette that I'm more familiar with, and that's okay too. Let's use these colors. These colors are pretty. These are my handmade paints by Masha, and I'm just going to start swiping and see what happens. I have nothing planned. I have no reference photo. I don't really know what's going to happen, so I just thought maybe we'll do a mini little blue scene here. And I just rinsed off my brush so that I can kind of pull that down. Maybe add some more color here. And you can see there's lots of water in a certain area because it's kind of pulling the paint down, and you can see that happening. And I like to paint on a board like this so that I can tilt my board all around in different directions. Let's add some more blue here. Let's put some blue down here. And if we don't like anything, we can just pick it up like that. So if we don't like something we did, right? If we don't like that pink in there, if we want to swipe of something else, we can just move stuff around. Nothing's really permanent in watercolor. Even when it dries, it can be manipulated a bit. So just make sure you remember that and keep going. and push yourself through. It doesn't have to always work the first time around. Sometimes it doesn't work the third or fourth time around, and that's okay too. Just keep on going. Okay, I introduced a little bit more dark up there. Not exactly what I wanted, and that's okay. Nothing has to be perfect. It's just playing with color. It is itty bitty tiny. Sometimes it's fun to paint with tiny bits, and sometimes it can be, some people find it overwhelming, some people don't enjoy it. So you can just start moving your paint around, adding some texture, or if you like the perfectly, you know, perfectly gradation of the sky, you can do that too. Really, you can do whatever you want with watercolor. And see, if I don't like that, I can just take my brush. Maybe I want to add some, no, this is watercolor, just plain old watercolor. That's okay. I've never really given gouache a real try. I'm a little nervous of it, to be honest. Oh, I don't know. I'm so loose that I feel like gouache needs a more detailed artist. And that's, I think that's where I feel, I'm not conflicted at all, because I'm not conflicted, but that's where I feel like I wouldn't do great in it. Let's add a little bit darker down here. Hello, hi, Molly. And so there, now we just have kind of a boring picture. So let's see what I can do. So it's kind of boring. Let's see, maybe some darker color up here. Maybe some moodiness. Thank you. That's kind of you. Kind of you to say. And if you're doing this and you don't like something and you don't really know how to fix it, or you're kind of not sure where to go with it next, maybe you're just like, don't really love that. What you can do is take a dry brush and sort of just very lightly sweep it across the page and see what happens. You can go in different directions, kind of sweep it down or up. I have a giant hair. See that giant piece of fuzz or something floating through there. So you can manipulate things in different ways with different tools. And I'm not a big fan of that bluish black I added in there. So I'm going to add a little bit more darker color. And again, it doesn't have to work out. It doesn't always work out, right? Sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it does. And it's okay if it doesn't. You know, it's a tiny piece of paper, not a lot lost, right? So you can just try again on another tiny piece of paper or a larger piece of paper, or even scrap paper. I do like to use 100% cotton paper with watercolor. It does seem to be the best. I wouldn't go cheap on the paper. It's fun. I've never really done watercolor. Watercolor's a lot of fun. You can water it down a lot and get detailed if you want. That's what they use for all the old Disney illustrations. They use watercolor? I didn't know that. I'm not a huge Disney person. I'm not a Disney person. I'm just not. I don't know all the fun facts. But I, of course, appreciate Disney because I think most people do, right? It's pretty amazing. And I like the older stuff because it's kind of what I remember. I have not been to Disneyland since 1993. Kind of dating myself there. Pretty long time ago, right? Very long time. I'd like to take my kids one day. They're getting older, so I think my window is closing soon, although I want to just go on their own. I only like what was on VH. Okay, so you like the older school stuff too. So long time ago on Instagram, I found this gentleman that that did those old, I don't know what, they're old wood carvings that they used to have around Disney. Maybe they still have a few, I can't remember. But anyway, he did those for them, and every so often he'd like show them on his page, and they're really, really cool. I was like, oh wow, that is pretty darn cool. Okay, so again, just playing with color here. Nothing has to be perfect. It's hard to be, for me anyway. I don't paint details, and I don't paint fine realistic stuff. I paint very loose and very just kind of abstract-ish sort of stuff. And so for me, these little ones, if I put pressure on myself like I am now to kind of perform, right, then it feels off. But these are kind of fun to do if you're just on a time frame, if you just want something quick to kind of warm up or cool down during your, maybe you had a hectic day and you just want something to do. These little ones can be kind of fun just to kind of loosen yourself up. Again, though, I'm feeling a little bit of pressure because, you know, I feel like it's a performance for me right now. And so it's not very flowing for me. But that's okay. Again, it's okay, right? It's just all for fun. Don't take yourself too seriously. Play with things and have fun. So let's go ahead and dry. So I do use a heat tool, and I'm going to mute you while I dry so you don't have to listen to the sound of the heat tool. You know, it's funny. And I always have to remind myself, watercolor has a really, really, really long, ugly phase. And I still forget that it has a really long phase of that. And so it can be, you know, especially when you're painting something you want to look good right away, you know, like for instance, for what I'm doing, I want it to look decent right away so that people don't just be like, oh, wow, she's terrible. But not that I should care what other people think, but you know, a lot of art, I imagine, has long, ugly phases, and I guess you have to remember that, right? Because stuff doesn't look great instantly. And got to give herself more grace. I have to give myself more grace. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few trees, maybe some imperfect trees, right? Nature's not perfect, so our trees don't have to be perfect. Nothing has to be perfect with nature because, again, nature is... Sorry, my camera's wobbly. I've not found one, or my stand is wobbly, I should say. I've not found one that I love. This one was great in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, you know, stuff loosens up, and it's not as great as it once was. Okay, so the trick to trees for me is going really fast. It's also finding the right consistency of paint. And I have to say, my consistency of paint feels a little bit off right now. I'm going to grab a different brush. I'm going to grab a script liner, which is kind of like a rigger or a liner, just a very thin brush. So it has a very long brush length and doesn't hold a ton of water, which is good when you want things to be a little more detailed and a little more finer. So just going to try this brush for a second here. And again, imperfect trees are a good way to go. And you can also make trees lighter and darker. The ones in the background are a little lighter, so these ones in the foreground I'm trying to make a little bit darker so that they stand forward a little bit, right? So these ones over here are going to be even a little bit more darker, so maybe it'll push those ones back a little slightly. And it doesn't have to. It's okay if it doesn't. I know lots of people have rules about shadows and perfection, and everything has to have its place, and I'm not one of those people, mostly because, you know, I don't paint that way. And for me, watercolor has become sort of like a fairy tale or a magical land I can escape to, a therapeutical magical land, right? And so in my therapeutical magical land, things don't have to be perfect. And so for you, whatever your art is or whatever your creative space is, it doesn't have to be perfect either, right? Because it's not for anybody else. It's for you to feel good and feel better and find what works for you and find what does feel good. Okay, so we have 3, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 trees, which is an odd number. And I don't like odd numbers, so I'm going to add one more tree right here to bring it to 9. And then we're going to find another brush and get a little bit of a darker color. This one has a really good tip. It's an ultra round. I really love ultra rounds. And so what I'm going to do is draw a few little birds just in the background there. Okay, very tiny birds. And then what we're going to do, should we do shimmer in white or should we do stars in white, or we can do snow, or it can be whatever you want it to be. Let's do it in this really pretty. I have one right here that I'm going to use, this shimmer right here. This is part of my advent calendar. This is a Shimmer Cosmic Creations advent calendar from this year, and these are all shimmers, and so these have been fun to open up. So what I'm gonna do is wet my brush, put about 3 drops of water into the shimmer. I'm gonna stir it up pretty well until I get a nice, this is a good reason to move your paints just a little bit away from each other so they're not in each other. Okay, so it's a nice consistency. Now that I have that nice consistency, what I want to do is I want to cover my entire workspace. Everywhere you don't want this shimmer, cover that up, because you know what? It gets everywhere. And I am tired of cleaning it off of all my palettes. So I do not kid when I cover all of the area. Okay, so just leave that little open area peeking. Take my round size 4 or 6 that I use and just lightly splatter. Those first few splatters are often larger, right? Because they're where all the water is. And so if you hit your brush a little harder at the end, you get those finer splatters. All right, collect all our little bits. So this has been about 16 minutes. So you can do something very, very quick after work, before bed, when you wake up, as a little warm up. Let me go ahead and dry this one more time. Right, and we can take the paint off. I do reuse my tape, so I just, oh no, that has not happened in the longest time. That's okay. Oh, wow. Huh, I wonder, no, that's my good paper too. Very strange. Ooh, this one did too. I've had not had my paper rip in years. I wonder why this paper ripped. Maybe I got it too wet and it didn't dry all the way? Very odd, it's ripping on all sides. I'm doing nothing differently than I normally do. So what I would do in this case is take a little bit of glue. Let me see if I have one nearby. I do. So what I do is I take just a regular old glue stick. So again, these are practice, so nothing's perfect, right? Nothing has to be perfect. So I just put a little bit of glue on there, and then I just do that. And yes, it bled through. I'm not using my good tape. My good tape is my Holbein soft tape. So if you don't want anything to bleed through ever, I would highly recommend using good tape, soft tape. But for this kind of practice stuff, I'm not a super stickler. So it doesn't bother me a ton. Let me just show you one thing before we go. Okay, so I pop it in this little frame like that and tie a little ribbon on there. And there you have a little ornament. Cute, right? And so this is what I did last year. And so I made a bunch of these little guys, and I sold them to my subscribers on Instagram, and they love them. It was so kind. They were so generous to entertain my crazy amounts of. So yeah, just a ton of little different scenes. So I painted these all for these little ornaments, and then I kind of chickened out and didn't offer them up this year. Maybe next year. We shall see. Maybe not. Maybe yes. Maybe no. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week around the same time. All right. Bye.